Biomed Nexus. Daily updates, your essential biotech, medtech, and pharma recap. No noise, just what matters. TLDR. The Financial Times reported AstraZeneca and BMS have been in talks to combine, a deal that would create a group worth close to 400 billion and rank among the largest pharma mergers ever. Treat it as reported talks, not a done deal. Novo's heart drug ziltivekimab failed its cardiovascular phase 3, sending shares down more than 9% and dealing a blow to the inflammation theory of heart disease. Lilly said retatrutide will file in the first quarter of 2027, with weight loss topping 20% at 80 weeks. The obesity leader keeps marching while its challengers stumble. Capricor's advisory committee went badly, and its CEO would not rule out legal action against the FDA, an extraordinary escalation. BioNTech named Sobi's Guido Oelkers as its next CEO as it builds an oncology business beyond COVID. Executive takeaway. The Financial Times reported that AstraZeneca and BMS have held talks about combining, a deal that would create a pharmaceutical group valued near 400 billion and stand as one of the largest mergers the industry has ever seen. Start with the caveat, this is a report of talks, not an announced deal, and talks of this magnitude collapse as often as they close. But the fact that it is being discussed at all is the story. Two companies we cover constantly, AstraZeneca with its relentless China deal-making and its push toward an 80 billion revenue goal, and BMS with its patent pressures and its unproven Karuna bet, apparently see enough logic in combining to have the conversation. The strategic rationale is visible: scale, complementary oncology and cardiovascular franchises, and cost synergy in a moment of patent cliffs and tariff pressure. The skepticism is equally visible, and Fierce ran a piece arguing a merger this size risks severe regulatory scrutiny, pipeline disruption, and mass layoffs while unsettling the whole sector. Mega mergers have a mixed history of destroying as much value as they create. We would put the odds of this specific deal closing as genuinely uncertain, but the signal is real. At the top of the industry, the pressure to get bigger is strong enough that even a 400 billion combination is on the table. Meanwhile, the obesity thread we set yesterday keeps developing in Lilly's favor. Novo had a genuinely bad day. Its IL-6 inhibitor ziltivekimab failed the ZEUS cardiovascular outcomes trial, sending shares down more than 9% and undercutting the theory that targeting inflammation directly can reduce heart disease. That comes on top of the CagriSema shareholder suit, the advertising fight with Lilly, and a franchise on the defensive. On the very same day, Lilly said retatrutide will file for approval in the first quarter of 2027, with weight loss above 20% at 80 weeks in its pivotal trials. One company is stumbling across multiple fronts. The other is setting filing dates on the most powerful obesity drug in development. We asked yesterday whether the challenges could dent Lilly's lead. Today did not help their case. Read full analysis. M&A AstraZeneca and BMS reportedly talked about a merger that would reshape the industry. AZN RT BMY. The Financial Times reported that AstraZeneca has been in talks in recent months to combine with BMS in a deal that would create one of the world's biggest pharmaceutical groups, valued at close to 400 billion, according to the Pharma letter. A combination of this scale would be historic, uniting AstraZeneca's oncology and respiratory strength with BMS's oncology, cardiovascular, and immunology franchises. The logic runs through scale and synergy at a moment when both face patent pressure and a tougher cost environment from tariffs. But the obstacles are enormous. Fierce argued a merger this large would invite severe regulatory concerns, disrupt pipelines, trigger major layoffs, and unsettle the broader biopharma ecosystem. Deals this size are as likely to fall apart as to close, and antitrust review alone would be daunting. For now, it is a report of talks, but that two companies of this stature are even discussing it tells you how intense the pressure to consolidate has become at the top of the industry. Obesity and cardiovascular Novo's heart drug failed while Lilly set a filing date. The gap keeps widening. NVO, Novo Nordisk's IL-6 inhibitor ziltivekimab, failed the ZEUS cardiovascular outcomes phase 3 trial, and shares fell more than 9%, according to BioWorld. The result is a blow to the theory that directly targeting inflammation can reduce cardiovascular events, a hypothesis several developers had bet on. For Novo specifically, it adds to a brutal run that includes the CagriSema shareholder lawsuit and the advertising fight with Lilly. On the same day, Lilly said it will file retatrutide for approval in the first quarter of 2027, with weight loss topping 20% at 80 weeks in the TRIUMPH-2 and TRIUMPH-3 trials, pulling the timeline forward from later expectations. The contrast is stark. Novo is absorbing failures across its pipeline and legal fronts, while Lilly keeps converting strong data into concrete regulatory timelines. The obesity race we flagged yesterday is not tightening. On this evidence, it is stretching further in Lilly's favor. Regulatory Capricor's hearing went badly, and now it is talking about suing the FDA. Capricor's advisory committee meeting for its Duchenne therapy Doramycel went poorly, and the company's CEO would not rule out legal action against the FDA afterward, according to Biospace. That is an extraordinary escalation, and it follows exactly the trajectory we traced: the surprise adcomm flagged in June, the reviewer doubts, and the negative briefing documents heading in. A negative panel is a serious blow ahead of the August 2010 decision, and a company openly contemplating litigation against its regulator signals both desperation and genuine anger at how the process unfolded. It also feeds the larger question we keep raising about why the FDA revived these adcoms for previously rejected therapies at all. For Capricor, the path to approval now looks steep, and the relationship with the agency has turned adversarial in public. Quick hits: BioNTech named Sobi chief executive Guido Oelkers as its next CEO, as the German biotech works to build a broader oncology business following the decline of its COVID vaccine revenue. Amgen disclosed a material cybersecurity incident in an SEC filing, saying hackers exfiltrated proprietary information and patient-protected health data from third-party cloud environments, a reminder that data security is now a material business risk in pharma. Moderna maintained its 10% growth target despite a phase 3 miss for its norovirus vaccine, and it faces an imminent FDA decision on its mRNA flu shot that will shape its post-COVID story. China's Impact Therapeutics licensed its cancer drug Ceneparib to Pharmanovia for Europe and other regions in a deal worth up to 423.5 million, another Chinese asset heading west, even amid the political scrutiny. Coming up this week, Q2 earnings continue, including Amgen and Gilead imminent, Moderna mRNA flu FDA decision, August 2026, Replimune RP1 FDA response. August 22, Capricor Doramycel PDUFA after a negative AdCom H2 2026. Arrowhead, ARO INB, and ARO ALK7 obesity, readouts red, full analysis Biomed. Nexus Pro institutional intelligence brief: would AstraZeneca and BMS actually merge? The reported talks between AstraZeneca and BMS deserve a clear-eyed assessment because a deal this size would reshape the industry, and the odds are genuinely uncertain. The strategic logic: both companies face pressure. BMS has significant patent cliffs approaching on key products and a growth story that leans heavily on the unproven Cobenfy expansion. AstraZeneca has ambitious revenue goals, the recent Wainua failure narrowing its path, and a heavy reliance on continued deal-making. Combining would create enormous scale, unite complementary oncology franchises, add BMS's cardiovascular and immunology depth to AstraZeneca's respiratory and oncology strength, and generate the cost synergies that justify most large mergers. In a world of tariffs and pricing pressure, scale has defensive value. The obstacles are formidable. First, antitrust. A roughly 400B combination would draw intense regulatory scrutiny on both sides of the Atlantic, particularly in overlapping oncology areas, and the current environment is not friendly to mega consolidation. Second, integration risk. Mergers this size routinely destroy value through pipeline disruption, culture clashes, and the distraction of integrating two sprawling organizations, and Fierce is right that layoffs and ecosystem damage would be substantial. Third, the history. The industry's track record with mega mergers is decidedly mixed, and many have been followed by years of underperformance and eventual breakups. Our read. The talks are real per the FT, but talks are not deals, and a combination this large has many ways to fall apart before it closes. The pressure driving the conversation, patent cliffs, the hunt for scale, and the tougher cost environment is genuine, which is why it is being discussed at all, but we would not assume it happens. More likely, in our view, is that the talks either collapse or reshape into something smaller, a partnership or targeted asset deal, rather than a full merger. What the report really confirms is the intensity of consolidation pressure at the top of the industry. When companies of this size discuss combining, it signals that even the giants feel they need to get bigger to compete, and that dynamic will keep producing large deals whether or not this specific one closes. Watch for confirmation, denial, or silence from either company, and treat the talks as a signal of the environment rather than a probable outcome. Novo's Zeus failure and the inflammation. Bet Novo's ziltivekimab failing the Zeus trial is a scientifically and commercially significant setback, and it lands on a company already struggling. The science. Ziltivekimab targets IL-6, part of the inflammatory pathway, on the theory that reducing inflammation directly could lower cardiovascular events independent of cholesterol and other traditional risk factors. This inflammation hypothesis has been one of the more intriguing frontiers in cardiovascular medicine, and a clear win would have validated an entirely new approach to heart disease and opened a large market. The Zeus failure is a real blow to that thesis, and it dents not just Novo, but the broader field of developers betting on anti-inflammatory cardiovascular drugs, the Novo context. This is the part that compounds the damage. Novo is already having a difficult stretch, trailing Lilly on obesity efficacy, fighting the advertising lawsuit it filed against Lilly, defending the CagriSema shareholder suit, and working to restore momentum after a rough period. A pipeline failure in a major cardiovascular outcomes trial is exactly what a company under pressure does not need, because it removes a diversification bet and reinforces the narrative that Novo is stumbling while Lilly executes. The read. Novo remains a strong company with a deep GLP-1 franchise and real scientific capability, so one trial failure is not existential, but the accumulation matters between the competitive pressure, the litigation, and now a cardiovascular failure. Novo needs a clear win to reset its story, and it needs it soon. The contrast with Lilly, which on the same day pulled forward its retatrutide filing, could not be starker. For investors, the read is that Novo's risk profile has risen and its narrative has soured, and the burden is now on the company to prove the trajectory can turn. Watch its remaining pipeline catalysts closely, because the market's patience is thinning and each setback lands harder than the last. Capricor versus the FDA. Capricor's CEO not ruling out legal action against the FDA after a negative adcomm is a remarkable moment, and it illuminates the strange state of the agency's advisory process. The situation. Capricor's Deramiocel, a cell therapy for the cardiac complications of Duchenne muscular dystrophy, was already rejected once. The FDA then called a surprise advisory committee meeting, issued reviewer critiques and negative briefing documents, and the panel voted unfavorably. A company publicly contemplating suing its own regulator is extraordinary because the FDA holds enormous discretion and litigation rarely succeeds. So this signals both genuine anger at the process and a sense that the normal path is closing. What it reveals: we have flagged all along that the FDA's revival of adcoms for previously rejected rare disease therapies was puzzling, and that industry leaders questioned the rationale. Capricor's reaction is the sharpest expression yet of that frustration. From the company's perspective, it resubmitted in good faith under what looked like a friendlier agency, only to be met with a surprise hearing and a hostile review. The whiplash between the FDA's flexibility in some cases and its harshness in others, the uneven reset we keep describing, produces exactly this kind of breakdown in the relationship. The read for Capricor and beyond. For Capricor, the August 22nd decision now looks genuinely imperiled, and a legal fight with the FDA, even if contemplated, is a long shot that mostly signals how bad the situation has become. For the industry, the episode is a warning that the current FDA is unpredictable enough to turn a resubmission into an adversarial process without clear warning, and that rare disease developers should build that risk into their planning. The broader question we keep asking, what the agency is trying to accomplish with these revived adcoms, remains unanswered, and Capricor is now the cautionary tale. Until permanent leadership sets a clear and consistent philosophy, expect more of these ruptures and price the regulatory risk accordingly. Coming catalysts: Q2 earnings. Wrap this week with Amgen and Gilead. Moderna's flu decision is imminent. Capricor's PDUFA is August 22nd after the negative adcom. The full catalyst calendar returns Friday. AstraZeneca and BMS are reportedly weighing a merger that would reshape the industry, though the odds are far from certain. Novo's heart drug failed while Lilly set a filing date, and Capricor is talking about suing the FDA. What are you watching? Reply to this email. Visit the Pro Hub Read. Full article sponsorship slots for 2026 are limited. See packages and pricing. New Biomed Nexus signals weekly sales intelligence for life sciences BD teams. Learn more.